All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 or Web Development Technologies class, I've been going through a series of presentations, my interpretation of them from developer.mozilla.org, and it's their Learn Web Development series. All right, I've been beginning with the Getting Started with the Web. All right, and as you can see, there is Getting started with the web overview, installing basic software, what will your website look like, dealing with files, HTML basics. So I've done the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these, which leaves me with 4 to go. CSS basics, which is what we're going to go over right now. Then JavaScript basics, publishing your website, and how the web works. All right, so I've just finished I did it over 2 tapes. The HTML basics. So this is the CSS basics. All right. CSS, again, is another one of these acronyms, and it stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Now, I've heard all sorts of different interpretations, etc. Some people have told me that if you can imagine that if you used a human being, the skeleton of the human being would more or less be the HTML. The clothes that you put onto the human being would kind of be the CSS, because it's the aesthetics that we put in here. It allows us to style the HTML web content in a way so it'll look a little bit nicer. All right. It is, again, not really a programming language, although that's not exactly true, because there are ways where you can use things like Sass, which we may or may not get into, where you can actually do some programmatic things with CSS, but it's not a true programming language where you typically do things like write if statements, write loops, use arrays, etc. So as mentioned here, like CSS, HTML is not a true programming language, but it's not a markup language either. Rather, it's, as they call it here, a style sheet language. So when you look in here, this is an example of using CSS. This says I want all paragraphs in this thing to have red text. Now, I'm not going to show you that one because I've got a red background already. And if I used red text on a red background, you wouldn't be able to see it. That said, if you look at the example that we've been going through, and I go out to my styles.css page, I said for the body, so for my whole document, I want it to have a background color of red, and to put in this /color is a little bit redundant. You don't need it. You can just say background : red. And this is my font color, and this is my font size. So for instance, if I wanted to change this, so let's say I wanted a different font family. So I'm going to put in here font family. And I'm going to put in, I don't know, well, let's use one of the ones they have here. How about, I don't even know what this Gill Sans looks like. But you can see it right now. I'm going to save this. And I'm going to go back to my I Love Missouri page, and let's see if the font looks different after I refresh. All right. You may or may not have been able to tell, but it does look different. In fact, let's use one that'll really make it look different. All right. And this is going to look silly for right now, but we'll change it back in just a bit. Let's come in so you can really tell the difference, and let's try to come in here and put in cursive. Okay, and let's see if we actually get a cursive font based off of that. So refresh. Now that looks a lot different than it did before. Okay, I guess I thought it would actually put it in the cursive, but it does not. But still, you can really tell the big difference. And that should have applied on every page. So if I go over to my About page, notice it's on there too. My Gallery page, it's on there. My Contact page. All right, and I still have my cat is very grumpy on the Contact page. I've got to remove that. So again, what CSS allows you to do is it allows you to change the way content looks. And it actually does this in 3 different ways. Or I should say, it allows you to do it in 3 different ways. I've shown you one of them already. So in other words, what we did in here was we came in, created an external file, in this case called styles.css. Then we added that file into each one of our HTML files. That is doing what's called using external CSS, because I'm using an external file. What if I didn't want to do that? What if I wanted to say that the H1 tag that I have on this page, just on my home page, I want that to be yellow? Then I could come in here and use what's called internal CSS, and I put in a style tag, and I'd say H1. So I want my H1s on this page to have a color of yellow. Just the ones on this page. Because I put it just specifically, I didn't link, I added this rule just onto this page. Let's see if it worked. All right, so I'm back on my home page. Will this become yellow when I refresh? And it is yellow. But the other ones have not turned yellow. So if I want to change things and have them appear on every page of the website, I use this external CSS that I showed you, and I link it onto one or more pages like this. If I want it to just be reflected on a certain page, all right, then I use style tags in my head section like this. What if I also say in here I want, I don't know, let's say for all of my paragraphs that are in here, all right, I want them to have a font family. And right now, remember, it's cursive. So let's use this, I don't even know what this will look like, this Segoe UI. All right, so let's see if that changed anything. So that will be this text in here. Does it change when I refresh? And indeed it did. But look at the way that this text looks. And now look at the way it looks on the other pages. It did not change. So let's, for example, look at this lorem right here. Notice how crooked the L is in lorem, etc. But when I go back to home, it doesn't look like that. Now, so I've quickly shown you 2 different ways. Let's see. I'm gonna come in here because I don't use this one, so I'm gonna Google it. So changing a word in a, I'll say in a web page using CSS. So how can I change text using CSS? Let's see. What I want is to use a very simple style tag. What is it? So let's go back. Let's do this. I mentioned to you before about w3schools.com. And let's go over to the CSS, learn CSS, see if we can find it in here. Let's see, CSS examples. I don't know, it says it's got 300 examples. The element selector, no. The universal grouping, no. Inline CSS, this is what I want. All right, because I never remember how to use this one just because I don't use it. All right, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use something like this, but not exactly this. And I realize you can't read it right now, so don't worry about it. So let's come back here. First of all, let's get rid of these tags. Let's just comment them out that I put in here. All right. And let's come down to where we've got this go to Rankin Technical College. And let's say I want the letter G in there to be really big. Hopefully you're with me here. I want the letter G that's in here to be really big. So I'm going to come in here and do this. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, I don't want this is a paragraph. I don't want any of this, but I do want this. So let's see. I'm going to say span, which we'll get into later. Style equals, and I'm going to put in here font size 3 rem. Don't worry what it means. It's not that big a thing. Span. Now, if this works, what should happen here, oops, is the T in this should be real big compared to the rest of this. So let's see if indeed it worked. This is a paragraph. See that? So there's 3 ways using CSS that you can change what appears in a website. The first way I showed you is the way it's the preferred way because it allows you to change stuff site-wide. So for the entire website, I used an external file that I put into my CSS folder that I saved with a CSS extension. The second way, which I also showed you, was by using these style tags. And that allowed me to change just what appeared on a page of the website. That's typically referred to as internal CSS. So this was external CSS. This is internal CSS. Finally, I showed you inline CSS, where we changed just something, in this case, just a letter on a page. Now, this is the least preferred way of doing things. You should really try not to use this if you can help it. And it's not, people always say, are you saying it's wrong? That's the wrong verbiage to use. Because what I'm not saying that it's right or that it's wrong. I'm saying recommended ways of doing something. That's what I'm telling you. All right? So let's jump back into here. So I've shown you that, in other words, and they've got their own examples. So this is what's called a CSS rule set. This says I want to take all paragraphs, that's the selector, and I want color, which represents font color, and I want it to be red, which is the property value. As you can see, the whole thing that's inside of the curly braces is referred to as the declaration. This is one rule that we're using in here. You can put in multiple rules. So we could have color red, then on the next line we could have font size, whatever, with a semicolon, and then have as many of these as we want. Now, this is a good news, bad news situation. The good news is that it'll change everything for every paragraph. The bad news is it's every single paragraph, whether we want every paragraph changed like this or not. So how do you get around that? All right. In other words, this is going to change every paragraph on the page. Give it a font color that's red, a width of 500 pixels, and a border around it that's going to be black. All right, let's just grab this. And I'll tell you what, let's go back and let's put that into that style tag that we put. So we'll just change it on our home page. Okay? So we put that up here before in our style tag, and then I took that and commented it out. All right, so I'm going to remove this. I'm going to put in this, and I'm going to uncomment out my style tags. Now, play computer. This is what I always tell my students. This should say that on this page, which is my index page, paragraphs. Now, red's not going to cut it here because I've got a red background. So let's say here, I don't know, brown. I don't know, that's kind of silly, but that'll work. It's going to look too close to red, I think. How about gray? There. It should have a gray color, 500 pixel width, and it should have a border around it. Let's see what that did, if anything. So we go back. I've saved this. I'm going back to here, and it should be on the paragraphs that are here. All right. Each one of these is now 500. Right here. This one must not have been in a paragraph tag. All right. But you can see now what it looks like. Let's double check and make sure that was not in a paragraph tag. Yep. I put the beginning paragraph tag in, but I put an ending one right after it. Now let's see if that go to Rankin is also inside of there. So you see what it looks like now, but when I refresh, see how it changes? Now every paragraph that's in here has gray for its writing. It's 500 pixel width. All right. And what else did we put in there? It's got the border around it. Okay. Let's make it a real big border and change the color so you see it. 3 pixel. Let's make it dotted. And let's make it green. How about green yellow? That should actually stick out a little bit. There. So how did that change things? Well, notice. See that? Well, you say, well, that's not wide enough. Fine. Then let's make it wider. Let's change this to 900 pixels. Should almost double its size. And you can see how it looks different. All right. All right, I'm already down or up to 18 minutes in here, so we haven't gone real far, but we'll get into, let's just quickly do this, selecting multiple elements. This would say all paragraphs and all list items and all H1 tags should all be red for their font color. Okay. When we come back in just a minute, we're going to talk about these selectors. We've already talked about the element selector, but we'll talk about IDs, about classes, attributes, and pseudo selectors. Okay. After that, we'll go into fonts and text, the box model very quickly, and that should pretty much do it for in here. All right, so I'll be back with this in just a couple minutes.